Here we go. Shalom, everyone, and Shavua Tov, Yom Rishon. This is the last time we'll say Shavua Tov to each other this year, as we now have entered the last week of the year in the Hebrew calendar, 5780, Tafshin Peh. This month of Elul that we're in is a unique and powerful month. As the last month in the Jewish calendar, leading up to Rosh Hashanah and the beginning of a new year, it is a month of transition, of cheshbon nefesh, personal accounting, of looking within and of being open and honest with ourselves. The Jewish tradition encourages us to use this entire month to focus on tshuva, repentance, return, something we'll get back to a little bit later on in this Dvar Torah, as well as building a bridge between this past year we are now concluding and the new year that is soon upon us. This time that we're in is about taking advantage of new beginnings that Rosh Hashanah will soon bring to begin anew. About asking ourselves which parts of who we have been and become thus far we want to bring with us into the new year, and which parts of ourselves is it finally time to leave behind. According to Jewish tradition, the name of this month, Elul, stands for the verse, Ani ledodi v'dodi li. I'm for my beloved as my beloved is for me. This verse from the Song of Songs paints a simple but vivid picture of deep relationship between two entities, which is a perfect metaphor for what I believe is the essential teaching of this month of Elul and our preparation for the new year. Allow me to explain. When we look at Judaism and its abundance of mitzvot, we can say that each mitzvah falls into a category that is defined by the concept of relationship. Relationship with God, relationship with other humans, relationship with oneself, as well as relationship with animals and the entire global ecosystem. During the month of Elul, we are meant to look at these relationships and honor what is positive and constructive about them, but also challenge ourselves to become more aware of what is broken about them and in need of fixing, healing, and improvement. It is very interesting to note that the first day of Elul, which is already a few weeks ago, according to the Mishnah, is one of the 4 New Year's days of the Jewish calendar, specifically designated as the New Year for the animals. This day in ancient times served as a demarcation point between adjacent years for the purpose of properly tithing animals. Animals that were born in one year were not to be considered part of the same group of animals that were born in the following year. When it came time to tithe the newborn animals, they were placed inside a pen and were made to pass through a narrow entranceway so that the farmer or shepherd could easily count them. 1 out of every 10 animals was marked and then separated from the other animals. The owner then brought that animal to the temple in Jerusalem, where it was offered as a sacrifice by the Kohanim, the priests there. And the meat was eaten by its owner inside the walls of the temple in a state of holiness and purity. The way I look at it, this was to instill in the owner of the animal the lesson of not taking eating meat lightly, to be intensely aware of the fact that in order to eat meat, a life of another sentient being must be taken, and to retain and to remember the experience of eating meat with hyper-consciousness and attention like he did in the temple each and every time he eats meat in his day-to-day life at home. Now check this out. A month later, after Elul is all finished, on the first day of the month of Tishrei, we have another New Year's Day, Rosh Hashanah, of course. The Mishnah teaches us that on this day, that it is on this day that all humans are judged by God. But listen to how the Mishnah describes this judgment process. Each person, the Mishnah says, passes before God one at a time like members of a flock. Just like the animals did before the farmer or the shepherd a month earlier. Now, I might be going out on a limb here, and I'm okay if I am. But I think it's completely logical to say that at least part of the reason the tithing of animals takes place specifically on the first day of Elul, beginning of the month dedicated to introspection, self-analysis, and tshuva, is to remind us about and help prepare us for what we ourselves will be going through and experiencing a month later on Rosh Hashanah. That is, passing before the Creator, one by one, and being seen, being counted, and being accounted for. In that one quick moment, but important moment, all of who we have been and all of our actions of the past year rise to the surface to be observed. And while many people approach the day of Rosh Hashanah because of this specific moment that takes place during it with feelings of fear and trembling and even guilt, I deeply believe, based on many texts that I've studied over the years, that it's not meant to be this way at all. Rosh Hashanah is not meant to be a time in which we're overwhelmed with feelings and thoughts about how bad God must think we are because of the multitude of mistakes we have made during this past year. Rather, it is meant to be a positive and powerful, uplifting and eye-opening moment of self-awareness, as if in that brief moment that we pass before God in Rosh Hashanah, our eyes become like the eyes of God, and we can see for ourselves who we have been and what we have done this past year since last Rosh Hashanah, in order that we understand how much better we can become and how much more good we can do in the world, specifically in regards to the various relationships of our lives. Our relationship with God, with other humans, with ourselves, and as we said before, our relationship with animals and the global ecosystem. Because we know that Judaism is filled with many teachings and mitzvot that not only encourage us, but also command us to be compassionate towards animals. Consider the following. The matriarch, Rivka, Rebecca, is specifically chosen as a bride for Yitzchak, Isaac, due to the compassion and care that she showed towards animals. Check out the story. Moses, was chosen to be the first and most important leader of the Israelite nation due to the kindness he showed a young animal that left his flock in search of water. There is a mitzvah instructing us not to slaughter a mother and its offspring on the same day. For as Nachmanides, the Ramban, says, this is considered as if he destroyed the entire species. On this, Maimonides, the Rambam, comments that this mitzvah is a precaution against killing a child, an animal child, in front of its mother. For in these cases, animals feel great pain, as there is no real distinction, Maimonides says, between the pain of humans and the pain of animals. We learn elsewhere that if a person sees an animal that belongs to someone else collapsing under too much weight placed on its back, that he must help to remove the weight, relieving its pain and suffering. He can't just walk by and say, oh, that's so sad. He has to physically and actively take part in helping out this animal. Even the Torah says, if that someone, meaning the animal's owner, is an enemy of his. Because it's not about the person, it's about the animal. It's about helping the animal. Going on, one may not work an ox and a donkey together in the field, because this would cause unnecessary pain to the donkey, who, being smaller and weaker, could not keep up with the pace of work of the ox. In addition, the ox, who chews its cud, would appear to the donkey as being allowed to eat while it works, causing more stress to the donkey. What incredible sensitivity the Torah has and commands us to have. The great Kabbalist Moshe Cordovero, who lived in Sfat in the 16th century, taught that one's compassion should extend to all creatures, and he should not disparage or destroy them, for divine wisdom extends to all creation. Just as divine wisdom, he says, despises nothing, since everything proceeds from it, as the verse states, you have made them all with wisdom, so should a person show compassion to all of God's works. And these are just a few of the many, many examples from our ancient and rich tradition that urges us and demands from us to have compassion for animals. But the truth is that the world has drastically changed in the past couple of centuries. Most people in our technologically advanced modern society are no longer farmers or shepherds. Most of us don't own animals, work with animals, or come into contact with animals very frequently, except for maybe pets. Of course, animals still play a big part in human society, mostly and for food, but our contact with them has become very hidden and placed behind the scenes, or more accurately, behind the walls of the factories and industries that make use of them. In order for most people today to become aware of this contact or this relationship, they need to consciously take the time and make the time to peer behind the curtain of our consumer society, where the distance between farm and table has never before in human history been greater, specifically in the meat and dairy industries, in order to see how animals are used and how they are treated. Once people do this, they will sadly see that the animals used by our modern industrial society to make these products are more often than not treated in ways that go directly against the values and even the laws of Judaism. Some examples include animals raised for their meat, eggs, or milk live in cramped conditions, either in overcrowded cages, pens, or sheds for their entire lives. Animals are not allowed to live and roam around outside in their natural environment. Newborn animals are ripped away from their mothers immediately after birth. Animals live on concrete floors and in metal wired cages. Animals are shipped across the world in massive ships, cramped into tight quarters, and eventually find themselves standing more than knee deep in their own feces that accumulates throughout the voyage. And yes, all of this happens in the kosher meat and dairy industry as well. And if this moves us and bothers us, as it should, since according to the Talmud, one of the main and inherent traits of the Jewish people is their compassion and mercy, then this is the time of the year, Elul, going into Rosh Hashanah. Then this time of the year, Elul going into Rosh Hashanah, is the absolute best time to contemplate our actions and their consequences on the welfare of animals, specifically the products we buy and the foods we eat. It is clear that according to Jewish law, the act of using animals for food is permitted. But for most of Jewish history, almost all of Jewish history in fact, the animals used by Jews for consumption lived lives that were in accordance to other Jewish laws. Laws that are no less important than the law of shechita, slaughter, the main act that renders an animal kosher to eat for a Jew. But with the industrializing of our food economy, so many of the beautiful and ancient laws of our tradition regarding animal welfare have been disregarded, and trampled on in the name of efficiency, profit, and mass production. But Judaism is a huge believer in the power of tshuva, the ability for us to repair what is broken, to recognize when we haven't been living up to our greatest potential as individuals, as a nation, and as a global society. And while positive change can be made any time of the year, there is a special koach, energy, power, or force to the month of Elul that inspires us and assists us in becoming more real and honest with ourselves, preparing for that moment when we will pass before God on Rosh Hashanah, and not only become hyper aware of who we have been and what we have done up until now, but perhaps more importantly, who we can become and what we can do from this point forward. This, I believe, is the time to focus on the pain and suffering our lifestyle choices may be causing to animals. This is the time to consider making changes in our diet, not because eating meat is inherently wrong according to Judaism, but because there is something inherently wrong with how most, even almost all, animals being raised in a world today for meat and dairy and eggs are being treated. And it is clear to me that Judaism doesn't support that. It is clear to me, if I can say such a thing, that God, the creator of all life on this planet, doesn't support that. And deep inside, I do believe our truest and most honest selves don't support it either. Let this be the year of incredible change in the Jewish world and in the world at large, with more and more people choosing a more compassionate diet and a more caring lifestyle. Let's all do our part. Let's all do what we can to make this world, to make this a better world for all living things, humans and non-humans alike. Shana Tova Umetuka Dukulam. To everyone, an incredibly great and sweet new year. I thank you for tuning in and for listening. Feel free again to share some thoughts or questions in the comments to create dialogue and conversation and further learning. But for now, I will sign out and I will say Shana Tova Likulam. A great happy new year to everybody. Akiva Gersh from Vegan Rabbi. All the best and be well.